Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, but then when I come back, I was ready to engage. Yeah. I'm still waiting for my
Hi, I've been in your house advocating for Farah. I think I've got my camera, so I will probably take some pictures.
Yeah, I'm live streaming now. So.
I'm mixing handbook.
That's a very good question. I'm live streaming. Onto the main YouTube channel. There isn't anyone actually doing Sophie's here, Sam's here, Lula's here, a lot of the media team is here. Alana, the main social person, is away. So, I'm sure there's I don't know who's doing Facebook.
It's not a problem, I just
Whatever feels best, but I also think if you're roaming, you can always find your way through it. Find out whether the live stream, whether the live stream going I don't know, I think maybe you have to choose live. Go to videos maybe in the far left. Yeah. I'm going to take feedback now.
Are these reserved?
No.
Well, I think it was Will and Sam amongst others.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And Clare designed it, I understand.
Ah, okay. Wow.
Oh, look look at the dead penguin. Oh, fuck.
I know. What's that picture like? Oh yeah, I remember this. This was a really nice.
And look, they've all done a different... Okay, so it's Clare, Alison, Sam Knight.
Someone just wrote on it. This is really live. Someone just wrote on it. The dead penguin is sick. As in like kid. Hey.
Not really. To some friends, isn't it? Sophie, have we got someone tweeting?
Who is on? Someone just asked me who's on social. Someone just asked me who's on social.
Someone was meant to be as well.
Hello everybody, can you hear us if we just sort of speak like that? Is that alright for everybody? Yeah, great. No. Oh, actually hold the mic. Hey, look at that. Thanks everybody for coming to the launch event of This Is Not a Drill, an Extinction Rebellion handbook. We started writing this book around December last year, and then it's been a really quick process.
We're half of the editorial team. There's actually two others. Clare, Farrell, who is currently off in Denmark meeting AOC and doing lots of snazzy stuff over there. And there's Dr. Alison Glyn, who is academic with brings an amazing scientific background to what we've put together. So we hopefully bring lots of different voices from the movement, from all parts of the movement. This is the kind of combined wisdom, hopefully, of people from around the world, from Extinction Rebellion in London to people from, within Extinction Rebellion and everyone around the world engaged in the subject. So.
Yeah, but we're planning to bore you about the book in about 5 minutes. Right now we've got with us Farhana Yamin, who is an Extinction Rebellion activist and has also contributed one of the first chapters in this book called Die, Survive or Thrive, and she's going to just take to the podium for like 5 to 10 minutes and talk us through a little bit about how she's arrived at this revolutionary mass movement, her journey here, and also maybe read a little bit from the book. Thanks, Mark. Yes, please, yeah. I mean, if you want to.
Let's make a decision. I think I'll just sit here. Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming. Thank you to Penguin. I think there are going to be proper thank yous to all of the team from Penguin side later. But I want to thank especially the 1,130 arrestees who made the rebellion really, really what counted for the courage that we all needed, to make fundamental change happen in the UK and to signal from here in the UK that we are prepared to do whatever is necessary to now save humanity. So they're not represented in here, but I hope that there will be another book, with the testimonies of the very people who created the rebellious spirit that the book intends to celebrate. So, Sam is one of them, and I'm also one of them, but I think it's important to remember this isn't about famous people, this isn't about celebrities, this is about all of us. This is about people from every walk of life who joined hands and said enough, and they stood up for justice, they stood up for all of the victims of climate inaction, they stood up for all of the hundreds of years of the exploitation of nature that has been taking place, which has actually brought us to the ecological collapse that we're now facing. It's really important to remember this is not just about climate change, it is also about the loss of nature, and we have been pillaging nature and destroying it for hundreds of years, and we have a special responsibility here in the UK as the first country that industrialised, as the first country that should decarbonise and to restore nature. And that's what I think Extinction Rebellion's 3 demands are aimed at doing. My journey here, it's quite a long one. It's 30 years in the making, I guess, as a climate change lawyer. with 4 kids along the way and negotiating every single one of the major international treaties that have defined the international response. So the Climate Change Convention in 1992, the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, and then the Paris Agreement in 2015. And I was also part of the first 3 rounds of the IPCC, the UN Climate Change Scientists, who report every 5 years or so on science. I was also part of that effort and have always been an advisor and a negotiator with small island states and least developed countries. And many of those countries in the last decade have been alerting the world, demanding action, alerting to the existential crisis that they're facing. They are already facing devastation. Many countries have had 3%, 4%, 5% of GDP knocked off. And I point out that figure because Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, a day or 2 ago said that 1% of GDP was too expensive for the UK to take action. Countries are looking to the UK, they're looking for leadership, they're looking to us to take decisive action, and I think the handbook is part of the effort of holding all governments to account. Today's a really special day for me. I'm dressed in pink as well, and I'm about to shoot off and not be here to go to Channel 4, because today is a historic day. The UK will become the first country to have a binding long-term target of net zero emissions by 2050. And I know that for many rebels that will be not enough. It isn't enough. It isn't enough for me either. But it is a huge step forward, and this target has taken a decade to put on the international statute book in Paris. It's included in a softer way, and it will be included in a legally binding, hard way in the UK legislature from now on. But the tough questions remain. First of all, we've taken too long to put net zero by 2050 on the UK statute books. We should have done it 3 or 4 years ago. The target itself is no longer in science, it's not compatible with 1.5 degrees. We are still continuing to fund and expand fossil fuel infrastructure, expansion of Heathrow, fracking, reducing subsidies to renewable energy while ramping up subsidies to fossil fuel industry. And so actually it's a pretty inconsistent story, and the need for rebels and rebellions for, I hope, not forever, because I don't want to be a rebel forever. I want to sort of have some kind of a normal life at some point. But I think we will need to use all the tools that are spelt out in this book to hold not just the UK to account, but to signal to everywhere that rapid restoration of nature, energy efficiency, rapid deployment of renewable energies, rapid reduction in air quality and pollution are going to make us all healthier, happier, and create a more equal society. So that's my journey. I'm going to sort of shoot off and do an explanation of why the 2050 target being in UK law is both a fantastic thing, but also a lot more needs to be done, and that the rebellion will continue. And I hope very much that the energy and the vision and the courage that Extinction Rebellion tapped into and encouraged and showcased will be taken forward by many other people, by many other countries, that we will stand behind the youth strikes that are going forward, that we will stand behind all of the businesses that are now coming out and saying, yeah, we really are ready to take action. We've got culture declares, we've got doctors declaring a climate and ecological emergency. I live in Camden. Camden's one of 125 councils that have declared now a climate and ecological emergency. So those declarers will need to be supported and also will need to be held to account to make sure that they deliver on those declarations. And I hope that you guys will all support them and join them in making sure that we turn back from the cliff edge that we found ourselves in and put humanity on a safe path.
Do you want to read it? Thank you so much, Farhana. And yeah, it's just there is something special for me about the sort of like rich diversity of the movement, in the sense that you get sort of like spoiled in Extinction Rebellion, I remember last year, back in November, when we shut down 5 bridges. The April Rebellion was not the first rebellion. We had the first one in November last year. And those of us working in the sort of temporary offices that we had at the time sort of became accustomed to people just walking in and going, I've quit my job, how are you going to use me? And it got to the stage where we sort of had a process for this, you know, go and do some paperwork, pop them off with like an Excel spreadsheet that can make people do something and contribute something to the cause. And then somebody walked in who was the sort of ex-lead author of the IPCC, and for me that was a major turning point for the rebellion, because this was the sort of establishment eating itself, not saying that yeah, you are the establishment, but this is a sea change. Extinction Rebellion is very different from the revolutionary mass movements that came before it. It's similar in so many ways, but it's also existing with its own beautiful energy, which is so huge and so diverse. And one of the hardest things is trying to keep that diversity together and try and bringing everybody on board in the movement and forwards together. But it's also the sort of main strength. So thank you, Farhana. Out of interest, just to sort of know what the room is like, how many of you guys were there on the April Rebellion? How many people took part, just as a sort of vague show of hands? So most people. How many didn't?
Yes, come on, why not?
And how many people sort of feel like with the sort of genesis story of Extinction Rebellion? Yes, and most people. Okay, cool. Because that sort of influences what we're going to say next.
I'll make it up now.
Yeah.
Beamed in from space and now.
We've split the book into 2 sections, which are Tell the Truth and Act Now. And I was going to read the introduction that I've written. Just would tell you everything you already know, so I'm not going to do that. And if you sort of have questions about that, let's talk about that in the Q&A afterwards. But I guess as a sort of very simple explanation of how we got here. Last year, at some point, 15 to 10 people got together in a small English town and decided to start a rebellion. And what they did was they went to the library and they read a lot about how to achieve social change and how to achieve system change. And then they toured the country in lots of and they gave talks to people in which they set out very clearly the science and then gave a rational response, a rational reaction to that, which is non-violent mass civil disobedience. And slowly, although you probably couldn't sense it, lots of people were waking up and signing on to be arrested for the cause that they believed in. We declared rebellion on the 31st of October 2018, and I think roughly sort of 2,000 people turned up then. Greta Thunberg came all the way in an electric car with her dad, and Karen Lucas spoke, Clive Lewis spoke, were both in the book. And that was how this started. We then shut down 5 bridges in November that year. There were lots of actions leading up to that we sort of call movement building actions, and we can talk about our theory of change a bit later.
Piece in the book by Roger Hunt.
There is indeed, yeah. And then fast forward to the April Rebellion, where I guess most of you know the story there. So instead of going through all that, I'm going to read the chapter by Hindu Mara Ibrahim, who is an indigenous activist from Chad. I met Hindu at COP24 when Farhana invited various members of Extinction Rebellion to come and join her and put pressure on governments all across the world to act on climate change and raise their ambition. And again, this was a sort of sea-changing moment for me, because we were in the heart of the establishment in these corridors, and people were giving us sort of standing ovations for the speeches we were making and the actions we were taking. And Hindu's been leading this struggle for years and years, and I think it's fitting that she sort of becomes the voice of the Tell the Truth section. So this is Hindu, and forgive me if I don't do her justice. When my mother was born, in the early 1960s, in the nomadic indigenous communities, Lake Chad, which gives its name to my country, was covering 25,000 square kilometres between Chad, Cameroon, Niger, and Nigeria. This is the equivalent of the size of a small country in Africa, like Rwanda. Today, this lake, which is the heart and soul of the Sahel region, covers only about 2,500 square kilometres. In 50 years, we have lost 90% of this resource, so essential for the life of one of the poorest regions of the world. Across the globe, grandmothers and grandfathers of indigenous peoples can tell us similar stories. They are living witnesses of climate change. The grandmother of my sister Jani from the Sami people of the Arctic can describe precisely the disappearance of ice and snow. The grandfather of my brother, Clare, from the Quechua people of the Amazonia can tell how the rainforest was once infinite and how it's disappearing because of deforestation. The ancestors of my brother Samson of the Pacific see the coral bleach and the sea level rise gradually. Some, like my brother Gallagher and others, even losing their land to protect their communities. Everywhere on the planet, more than 370 million indigenous people who live according to the rhythm of nature in symbiosis with the environment tell the same stories. These stories tell a tale about the end of the world. Climate change is often something abstract for the inhabitants of rich countries, for all those who live in cities and have forgotten what they owe to nature, but not for us. For us, it's a reality that comes from elsewhere. We are witnesses of the consequences without being able to act on the causes. Yet we do not want to resign ourselves to seeing nature die before our eyes, because nature is our life, because nature is our identity. In the community where I was born, families keep pace with the seasons and water to feed their huge herds of thousands of cattle, which help protect the fragile ecosystems of the Sahel through pastoral transhumance. Men read the wind, the clouds, birds' flight and insect behaviour to know when the rain will arrive, in order to guide their animals to pasture. Women find in each season plants that will cure diseases. Nature is our pantry, our supermarket, our pharmacy. But in the last 1 or 2 decades, things have been changing. Some livestock diseases, unknown until recently, have appeared. Water is scarce, pasture too. Heat waves up to 50 degrees Celsius kill humans and animals alike. Since the beginning of the century, my country has experienced a warming above 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is what the planet should know by 2050. In some parts of the world, for example, the Arctic, indigenous peoples face a warming higher than 2 degrees Celsius. And by the time Europe perceives the first signs of climate change, we will already be living in a climate-changing era. This change brings poverty. It also brings conflicts. The least water source becomes the object of all tensions because fishermen, farmers, and breeders, men start to fight for water or fertile lands, and weapons are never far away. Chad is far from Europe, where we saw in the summer of 2018 helicopters arrive to supply water to herds hit by droughts. Here, if water does not come from the clouds, it will not come from anywhere else. Water is not the only problem, because with it, plants and animals essential for ecosystems and biological diversity disappear too. Women see their traditional medicines evaporate, preventing grandmothers from passing on to their daughters and granddaughters the names of plants that can cure diseases. With this knowledge disappearing, it is part of the memory of humanity that is threatened with extinction. All knowledge that is lost, every ancestor that goes out, is a book that burns or a library that disappears. Indigenous peoples are the guardians of ancestral knowledge that draws from the environment the solutions of everyday life. These solutions are priceless. It is a treasure for all those who have to face climate disorders because it helps them to cope with the worst of its consequences, such as droughts, floods, hurricanes. In the Pacific Islands, indigenous people transmit from generation to generation the varieties of edible plants that can feed an entire people after a typhoon, and so allow them to survive when all crops are destroyed. In the Sahel, the elders know which square continues to flow at the worst time of droughts. In tropical forests, indigenous people know which plants best protect against some endemic diseases such as malaria or dengue fever. Indigenous people are also the ones who best protect nature because it is their work tool. In the heart of tropical forests, it is the areas populated by hunter-gatherer communities that we can find the most biodiverse areas. Annual transhumance contributes to the natural fertilization of soils, thus developing a great green wall that prevents desertification. In coastal areas, from the Central American tuna to the Pacific Maori, traditional fishing methods preserve coals, mangroves, and other unique ecosystems that are most effective barrier to rising sea level. Indigenous peoples do not want to be the silent victims of climate change. They are ready to share their traditional knowledge and to reteach humankind how to live in harmony with nature. But for this, it is imperative that all major polluters in the world respect their commitment, made in Paris in 2015, to do everything to limit global warming to below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Because if, in the next 10 years, the international community does not resolutely engage with the transition towards a net zero emissions world, then I will likely be part of the last generation of indigenous peoples. If tropical forests continue to be replaced by crops, if we're excluded from our lands, if the oceans are filled with plastics, if the chemical pollution that goes with industrial agriculture does not cease quickly, then our peoples will disappear, and with them millennia of knowledge of listening to nature. That's Hindu. And when I first read that, it made me cry. And I remember when I first met her, she was crying, and it's because it was a day at COP where the entire conference had been debating whether to note or support the latest IPCC report, which was the special report on 1.5 degree warming, and she looked at the 3 or 4 of us that were there, and I'd just seen Glyn in the crowd, Farhana, and she said, this amount of warming is a death sentence for my people, and we're debating whether to even recognize that this report exists. So it's nice that voices like that found a place in the book, and over to Will. Yeah.
So the book has a few, well, quite a few, rather sort of depressing or kind of scary moments. We've peppered the book with dispatches from the front lines of climate change. That can include people from, there's a couple who are farmers in the Himalayas. Again, it was a very harrowing thing to engage with, to write down and transcribe their interview. There's, as I'm sure many of you encounter and deal with this subject, it can be extremely stressful and upsetting. But there's also some quirky stuff, and there's some fun pieces by Douglas Rushkoff and his interaction with hedge funders asking how they can protect their bunkers. There's some really kooky stuff. So the first half is about telling the truth, and that is depressing. And it's hard-hitting. And the second part is about what we can do. And we're an activist movement, and Extinction Rebellion is growing incredibly fast. I think we just reached our 59th country today. Now we've got sort of 354 city major groups. And we get these updates through every day, and it's just brilliant. It's just so kind of refreshing and heartwarming to know that this is growing fast, and we're not doing this one alone. You know, this is a global movement, and the school strikes are there. There's hundreds of other organisations who've worked tirelessly for decades before us, and we are sort of part of this international mix, and we all need to get together to work, to do different things and try different tactics and see what sticks. And with that in mind, the second half of the book is called Act Now, and it includes, hopefully, the collective wisdom of from across our movement, and it tells some stories about what happened on April the 15th, from April the 15th. Some of them, I'm a bit short on time, so I'm going to pass over to some of the people who can tell us what they did. But there's a particularly nice piece in here about cultural roadblocks. It tells the story about a boat, the 25-foot boat that inhabited onto the centre of Oxford Street and did something that no one had seen before. And I think that's something that Extinction Rebellion kind of stands for. It does something that people haven't seen before, and that's its success. But also it offers a better vision of than what is currently in place. So when we block and take over 4 lanes of traffic over a river and a bridge, and turn it into a free festival with free food and skateboard park and live music, that's a better vision of how things can be. And the same thing for Oxford Circus. You know, that's a essentially dismal shopping district, and it's turned into a some sort of, I don't know what that was. It was sort of party, sort of
surreal fever dream.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Surreal fever dream. And you know, Marble Arch became a campsite, and Parliament Square became a theatrical zone. And some amazing people here doing some t-shirt printing and various printing over there. Kat was massively involved in organising and building works, Miles Art Factory. And we're going to hear now from Momo, who was involved in the catering, which is a vital part of the movement, and creating, expressing a better vision than what was there previously. So over to Momo Haque.
That won't happen in the kitchen all the time. Anyway, so my name is Momo Haque. I was a part of Extinction Rebellion. I'm still a part of Extinction Rebellion. So my job was that making sure everybody get fed. And it's looks like a really easy job, but it's not. And so I like to read my part, but I think if I talk about it, just more better. Yes. So you can see and listen how we can do that. So I got a call on 1st of April. Would you like to cook? I need a chef to cook somewhere on the roadblock. I was like, yeah, I'd like to do that. Why not? It's like, you know how to cook? I was like, yes, of course I know how to cook. It's like, okay, you know how to run a kitchen? I was like, yes. Can you run 4 kitchens? Like, where? Middle of the road. Like, yes, actually. Where the food's gonna come from? Could you please find out? From who? Do you know anybody? It's like, okay, I can do something about it. Then yeah, it's basically just making some calls, asking people, can you cook? I can cook, yes, fantastic. What are we gonna cook? We're gonna cook all together with this bunch of vegetables, which we skip and been given by developers and other people. And this rice, lentils, that's perfectly fine, that's great. How are we gonna make this kitchen happen in the middle of the road? I remember that 9 o'clock in the morning, there was loads of equipment sitting in a corner of the street, and there was a police just running around like, what are you guys planning to do here? I was like, we're planning to cook. When? I was like, in a half an hour, 45 minutes. And we just basically just made it happen. And soon as the pink boat, we're talking about an ironic boat, just comes in and everybody just come together, block the road, and start cooking food. It was just amazing to see people, and they don't understand like how Extinction Rebellion, it's just not activists and protesters. It's a bunch of normal people. People go to work, people go to school, and we all think food is a very important part of it. And I remember that this guy coming on the lunch break, just on the road, like having their free meals on the street. And somebody asked me this question, like, where are you getting your food from? I said, it's ordination, being given by all of you like guys. And a lot of people who come and work in the kitchen, they have nothing to do with the protest, but they were just surprised to see, like, whoa, can you feed thousands and thousands of people on the middle of the road? It's out to the people, I guess. And yeah, that's pretty much it, what I did, and I'm gonna do it until I die, I guess. Feeding people. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to know how to cook, I usually cook vegan meal. There's a good recipe in this book, but I recently started this thing called pickling. I understand it's an amazing thing to do, pickle things. Because I think we are in a pickle at the moment. And we need to start pickling our vegetables, make pickles. And I found out recently this 80% of produced in the world goes in a waste, like Russia, especially perishables. UK is a country who wastes their 45% of organic waste. It's just alarming. It's just something we all have to act upon it. And we can save the world and start picking and eating less, I guess. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, man. I ate so much of your food. So we're going to pass on to Charlie Waterhouse and Clive Russell, who run an incredible graphic design and creative agency called This Ain't Rock and Roll. They've been absolutely vital in expressing the Extinction Rebellion visually across kind of every touch point of the rebellion. So from flags to woodcuts to this book here with its dead penguin, and yeah, over to these guys to explain more about that.
Thank you. In the foreword of the book, Vandana Shiva writes, "Today's struggle for truth is that extinction and extermination are not inevitable. They are crimes against the earth and against humanity. And we can stop this crime by refusing to participate in and cooperate with this project of ecocide and genocide. Together, as a diverse species and diverse cultures, we have the creative power to stop extinction through non-cooperation at every level, beginning with each of us, expanding the rebellion into ever-widening, never-ascending circles of interconnected life and freedom." So from the off in This Is Not a Drill, we're presented with this wonderful dichotomy. We must not cooperate. We must be ever more connected. It sounds like an oxymoron, but of course Vandana's provocation is perfectly simple. It reminds us that there are sides in this fight. There are sides to history. Moreover, it reminds us that creativity will allow us to interconnect the fight and of history. So, as just one member of quite a large XR art group, I'd like to talk just for a couple of minutes about the visual creativity that's in This Is Not a Drill and the movement. Because creativity, I think, holds a very special space at the heart of XR, much like the non-hierarchical structure, non-violence, and the regenerative culture of the movement. It has helped us communicate in a way that's resonating with people around the world who have previously felt perhaps impotent in the face of the crisis. Our skulls and bones, our bees and butterflies speak of the fragility of life and of our interconnectedness with each other and the plants and animals with which we share the planet. Our imagery and words speak of death and morals, reflecting the grief that's so essential to the truth of our movement and the emotive connection so important to our actions. Our bright colours talk of diversity and I think too of hope. Our attitude to creativity allows us to do things that communicate with a humour sometimes and also an efficiency that traditionally people trying to make a point might balk at. Take the book. It's great. It is absolutely wonderful, of course, to be published by such an august institution. But if we don't sort this shit out, penguin, you're fucked too. That's why we killed the penguin. But that's also why we put our super glued feet down and insisted on the book being printed on recycled paper. Perhaps most personally, most pertinently of all, it's the approach to the creative that's really important. For starters, it's absolutely been at the heart of the movement from the off. From the discussions around what we should call ourselves, to how actions are planned and executed, from our key values and demands, to how we talk about what are really complicated and difficult subjects of science or politics. Creativity has been intimately aligned to the strategic core of XR, and that's really important. Then there's what we create. No merch in a traditional sense. No extinction symbol anywhere near anything remotely commercial, even fundraising, and you certainly won't see it in the book. We're attempting to do things differently throughout XR, and that applies to creativity as much as it does to politics and the protest. But even more than that is the how we create. Now, Clive and I might be standing up here and doing a bit of a design talk, but the way Extinction Rebellion looks or sounds has been an amazing collaborative effort. Dozens of us inputting, discussing, someone has an idea, someone picks it up and runs with it, everybody open-minded and everybody minded to make things work. It's the absolute antithesis of the real world hamster wheel. And of course, everyone's doing it for nout as well. Then there's the production. Don't buy merch. Make your own. Upcycle your clothes, print them with your family, your friends, with strangers, with people you've never met tonight in this room today. The stuff in the book is what you'll be wearing home tonight. The XR Art Station is a joyous, shared experience. I'm sure many of you shared it over Easter. It's a glimpse of a more resilient, shared future. It's the movement in miniature. It's like Momo's food or Liam's pink boat. It's XR made beautifully real for each of us and all of us. And also, by the way, the planet called, she doesn't need any more fucking branded tote bags. One last thing. When you're making your own rebel uniforms in just a few minutes, remember, for all the autonomous empowerment and hands-on production, Extinction Rebellion is not a do-it-yourself movement. It's a do-it-together movement. As Douglas Rushkoff says in his, we all said it was quirky, I think it's quite terrifying chapter in the book called Survival of the Richest. He says, we can become the individual consumers and profiles that our devices and platforms want us to be. Or we can remember that the truly evolved human doesn't go it alone. Being human is not about individual survival or escape. It's a team sport. Whatever future, it will be together.
I should have read my fifth bit first. Anyway, thank you, Charlie. So, Charlie and I have been living in this space for a little over a year now, and it sort of reminded me today that when I read the book, and Sam just reminded me earlier, that when you read a book as a designer, you scan read it, and you basically don't take any of it in. And when I read it for real for the first time on a train with my partner, I was influenced to this. So please read this book. It is fucking amazing. From this book, I've chosen the very unlikely person, Rowan Williams, as my little bit of readout. I've got to thank the Church of England for releasing its people at age 70, because they used to carry on forever, and then they become wonderful philosophers that give us wonderful speeches and all of that sort of stuff, and they are suddenly free. But anyway, enough about that. Here's a bit about Rowan. I hope he's not here. So here we go. It might just work. It is just possible that sustained pressure will bring about a modest change of heart among decision makers and wealth creators, and some serious adjustments might be made. I can hear the sound of people not holding their breath. It isn't only inertia that we have to contend with. Unfortunately, it's vested interests, passionate commitment to the goods and privileges we enjoy because of the way in which we are, the collective wealthy of the world, have chosen to use the material that lies around us. What lies around us? In a way, there's the problem. We have completely and successfully internalized the belief that the world is made up of dead stuff plus active minds and acquisitive wills. We've lost or suppressed any memory of what it is to live in alignment with the rest of the world, to understand how our bodies themselves think, how we are fed and sustained by the flow of life and information through matter. Our technological skills, instead of reminding us of our deep involvement in all of this, produce ever more seductive ideas of how we could distance ourselves still further from the bodily structure that simply is and where we are. Now, how does this relate to design? Now, unfortunately, as a designer, I bear a great deal of the responsibility of the ills of the world. Design has been a game of acquisition since the 1980s. We have been inspiring you all to buy shit you don't need. And it's really, really fucking sad. And we're sold this idea of the neutrality of what we do. It's a moral neutrality. Agencies tell it to everyone. It's complete bullshit. But rather than talk about that bullshit specifically, there's a really, really great man who's a great hero of mine, and he designed something spectacular at the end of the 70s. And now it's seen probably as kind of a tourism gimmick. But at the time, Milton Glaser was living in New York. And at the time, New York was described as a shithole by everyone. Everyone hated it. So rather than think, oh, fuck, let's leave New York, he designed a t-shirt. It was really, really fucking simple. I heart New York. Everyone's seen it, it's been reused for Hackney and all other sorts of places in a really bad way. But also there's another great thing that Milton Glaser said. And he said, if you're a designer designing a fizzy pop bottle, do you think you're acting neutrally? Do you think it's a non-political act? Because it isn't. It's an act of acquiescence. You are saying to the neoliberal elites, yeah, I'm happy with your system. I'm just going to carry on and work for you. So designers out there, stop down your tools. Don't work anymore. The time has come. It's time for designers to step up. We have a really good tradition. Within this country, we have people like William Morris. Now, look at the stuff. He was a proper socialist. He was a design activist. He inspired the Bauhaus. Look at the punk movement. You know, why has none of that happened recently? So we've got to say, no, don't buy anything anymore. Stop buying. Time to put the brakes on. Don't go and buy Jonathan Evis's latest fucking iPhone. It really isn't worth it. It isn't going to be any better than the last. And don't think about Google and all of those people. Turn your back on them. It's time to get back on the streets and let these people know what we think to them. Thank you.
So now we have some time for a Q&A, and I think that's nominally meant to be me and Will, but considering there's so many amazing people in this room, I feel like, you know, just let everybody address your questions to anybody that you've heard speak. And also, there are so many amazing activists in this audience, and we might just try and feel it out to them occasionally. But if anyone does have any questions, now is the time to put up your hand. Otherwise, we'll find something else to wrap it on about for 15 minutes. Hey.
Hi. Does this work? Does this work? My name is Nick Rose, and I'm a fellow Penguin author. I wrote a book called How to Live Off-Grid. And I'm really thrilled to be here and looking forward to buying a couple of copies, giving it to friends. I wanted to ask, beyond the vital consciousness-raising activities that we're now currently involved in, where is this going? Am I right in thinking that actually we've all got to move off of the grid? Is that what we're aiming at in this movement?
I'm going to ramble in that case. I don't think we're asking anyone to go back to the Stone Age. That's not the sort of role of the Extinction Rebellion. This isn't like, we are directly making very clear demands to government to decide what we need to do about this crisis. So we've got three very clear demands, which are, first of which is to tell the truth, which is hence the first part of the book. And we need everyone to start telling the truth, and for governments to tell the truth to everybody around the world, and then from that starting point, to go carbon net zero by 2025 and halt biodiversity destruction. And that's obviously a sort of super hardcore deadline. It's 25 years ahead of Theresa May's and the party's announced carbon net zero date. And it's there because it's an incredibly hardcore deadline, and what it means is we're going to have to act radically and fast and make sweeping changes. But the way we plan on doing that is by implementing citizens' assemblies, which kind of sit beyond politics, which are a means of getting the people together to decide how we're going to move forward. And it will be presented with evidence. This isn't something that's run by Extinction Rebellion, it's not something that's run by government, and how many people are chosen is not, hopefully sits beyond lobbying. But the idea being, I'm sure most of you know this already, is that those people will then help decide how we're going to get to carbon net zero 2025, and that takes action. And maybe they will come with the solution, which is to unplug completely. I don't know, but if politicians are left to decide, maybe we'll lose one runway, maybe we'll have a little bit less fracking, maybe we'll give a little bit less fossil fuel subsidies. But when it's life or death and is in your own hands, then it's not about trying to negotiate how fucked you are. It's about dealing with the problem. And if going off grid is one way of doing it, then that's amazing. If in the longer term we're talking about what are we going to do, as things begin to break down, I think there's going to be a lot of people around the world who are going to have to go off grid way before we have to start worrying about it in Britain. And I hope that the situation that arises as a result of this biodiversity loss and climate change do not lead to some sort of fascist situation in which our option is to hide. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Mila?
I'd actually just like to say something about women in Extinction Rebellion. I know that I'm a woman and I'm part of the team of Extinction Rebellion. I know that Sam and Will would have done their best to get some female voices here because they get this, but we haven't had many of them. And there are some pretty good women in Extinction Rebellion. Gail Bradbrook and Clare Farrell come to mind. That you can't separate those two women from this movement, that when they speak, it's the DNA of XR, and when you see XR, it's them that you see, that they have made so much of this. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else to say, but yeah, I guess lots of the key women are busy, but keep an eye out for them because they're pretty fucking good.
If I could just step in and answer that. I am pale, male and stale, and I ask all women, all people of colour, all people that are underrepresented in the movement to come and join us. There's been so much talk about all the things that we're not doing and how we're not doing everything perfectly. We know that, but this is a movement that welcomes everybody because it's all our fucking problem. Wherever we are, whatever we look like, however we live. So absolutely, please, if somebody would like to come up and field questions with us, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. I was going to say, Nuala, come up here and answer questions with us. Nuala is amazing, and this is Lorna. They're both on our press team, and they work day and night for the rebellion. And it is the part of the rebellion that gets no praise, but is actually what fuels it. And there are no amounts of rounds of applause which can do them credit. The book starts. The book starts with a foreword by Mandana Shiva, and this is her first paragraph. The signs are loud and clear, from the earth, from science, from women, from children, from indigenous communities, from our daily lives. And that's no accident. It's because the climate movement for generations have been led by women and by people of colour, and that is because they are the ones who are feeling the effects of this crisis most severely, most keenly right now. And we have a duty as a movement to try and reflect the decades of work which have been done already, and not to come and trample over it in a sort of like premise, male, patriarchal way. So, another question?
As we have many local authorities throughout the country signing up to climate emergency, this Extinction Rebellion actually advised them about what's the process of taking into place, or at least come as more
I could speak to that because I'm actually involved in a local group, Exile Lewisham, which is planning its first action on Friday. I didn't hear the second half of your question, whoever it was that spoke. Do you mind just repeating?
Well, as many local authorities, in fact the government, I think, have actually signed up to climate emergency policy. Certainly Labour has, but obviously with the timelines for it. But what are you doing to advise them, and what systems they can put into place that's actually going to start being quite effective?
Well, I think the answer to that is quite similar to what Will was just saying, which is that we aren't putting forward solutions, but suggesting that what we need is a collaborative process by citizens' assembly, where people in those areas come together and decide what needs to be done. What's quite exciting is that Oxford City Council has already announced that they're going to set up a citizens' assembly, and I know, for example, in Greenwich, near where I live, they're in discussions to do it. So what we want to see is citizen assemblies, ideally, in every town across the UK, making the decisions about what can be done locally.
Hi, can I just ask about the process of how citizen assemblies are set up, are mediated, and what that means? Are there enough people who are skilled in that facilitation? If everybody signed up to a climate emergency, would there be enough people who know how to run citizens assemblies?
Yeah, so we select citizen assemblies by a process called sortition, which is basically randomly selecting people from wider society, but also that is representative of that society. So you don't accidentally, by some kind of like fluke of the randomization, get all white men, for example, right? So you're trying to find a group that is representative of wider society, but then enters a process in which you start briefing people. So there are independent experts and a moderation process in which people are skilled up and given the tools with which they need to make the decision. So it's about informed democracy and deliberative democracy in a very real way that happens on the ground and can be replicated in the locality as well as a sort of national level. And there are loads of people at the moment thinking about this sort of thing. So I mean, it's one of those sort of old things about radical ideas, right? Where it takes 30 years from somebody having an idea to it finally getting any kind of mainstream appeal. And this one has in particular gone like that in recent years, partly because Extinction Rebellion has been championing them, partly, to be honest, just because it sort of feels like its idea, its time as an idea has sort of come. So there's loads of academics working on it at the moment, and it would go into a consultancy phase. And one of the most important things is to say that this citizen assembly needs to be independent. It's not like we're going to be breathing down their neck going, I think you should think about this. It's really important that this is very much led by ordinary people, and the discussions that we want to foster, the revolution of democracy that is necessary in order to tackle the crises of capitalism and colonialism that have caused this crisis. In order to do that, we need to empower ordinary people to take action. So there are lots of boring, detailed stuff, and if you want to find out more, there's lots on the web. But we can just chat afterwards as well.
Can I just add one thing, which is that some people may have noticed that Rory Stewart, Conservative Party leadership candidate, has said that he would like to have a citizens' assembly on social care, which is pretty interesting because he came down to Waterloo Bridge during the International Rebellion and had a chat So that may have been the origin of that idea. Obviously it's better if it was a citizen-centred climate change. That we're moving in the right direction in a Conservative Party, which is, you know, encouraging.
From what I gather, there isn't a conventional hierarchy, and indeed, I was quite struck that you didn't particularly formally introduce yourselves at the beginning of this. If there isn't a hierarchy, which I think is interesting and perhaps is a very good idea, at the same time, if somebody were to say, offer you a large sum of money, some big funding, how would that work? How would it be about, you also indicated that many of you, if not all of you, are not actually getting paid. I just wondered how you would organise that and how funding, should you be hopefully lucky enough to get sort of appeal to people with large sums of money who want to help, how you would organise that.
So yesterday Radiohead donated loads of money to us. It's really hard is the answer, and we're still trying to work out the right way of doing things. The mode of decentralization and trying to form a post-consensus politics that works in reality and within the sort of flawed systems that we exist in at the moment is really tough, and it's an ongoing struggle. For example, with the sort of big donations that we've had in the past, we've sort of earmarked that for international rebellion. So we've been talking a lot about the UK side of things today, because it started in the UK and that's sort of like often easiest to sort of use as an example. As Will said, we're in like 50 countries now. We've seen exponential growth on a scale that we never predicted. And there are ways of getting that money out to create Extinction Rebellions all over and try and foster a sense of global rebellion, because this isn't going to just work if only the UK sort of wakes up and sees the light. We need rebellion everywhere all of the time. So it's really hard, but there are ways of doing it. I mean, I could sort of bore you for hours about how we structure ourselves. We call it like holacracy, and there are various ways in which various subgroups respond to one another and correspond, and we are like, it seems to be continually in phases of restructuring, and there is an element of what happens in a mass movement is you have to be flexible and you have to be adaptable and you have to just sort of roll with it and make sure that we are responding to the challenges of whatever comes towards us, and that will necessarily influence the way that we ourselves organise and mobilise. So it's incredibly tough, but I mean, the Radiohead donation is going to go to our international solidarity team, for example, who are then going to distribute it to the various groups around the world, so that's like one tangible example.
Yeah, I could speak a little to everyone in Extinction Rebellion being volunteers. I think it's one of the really exciting things about this movement, that there is money, so people do claim some volunteer living expenses. It's nowhere near what you would earn as a salary, and it's based on needs, so people decide what they need, and then that has to be public. So you write what you need, why you need it, how you're, a bit about how you're living, and whether that's, how you reduce your expenses, because they become the movement's expenses to some extent. And I heard one of our kind of founding talking about the way they designed it in terms of need rather than in terms of skill. I think is a really exciting and different way of doing things, because you actually get the younger people, the people with less experience claiming the most, or people who come from backgrounds who don't always have the privilege to be part of movements that want a lot of your time and don't give you and that you get the people who have a lot of skills, who've had time to build up some financial stability, claiming a lot less. And having said that, the number of people actually claiming anything is really small. So there's a huge number of people who have decided it's worth kind of eating through their savings to do this. What are you saving for anyway? Given the science, what kind of
what investment do you want to have in this current system, you know, saving to be secure in something that where like finance gives you no security.
And I would also just add to that as well, that my path to Extinction Rebellion was a little bit different from most in that I was seconded from my workplace. They carried on being paid exactly the same. So for me, it's had no financial sacrifice whatsoever, and basically I've had the time of my life. But these people are among the hundreds of people who I've been amazed and just so moved by, who have turned up every day and treated it like a job, and more, even though they've received nothing in return. To be honest, I'm not sure if I wasn't being paid, if I would be as committed as they have been, and I just think that that is something that is worth recognising. It's just another amazing facet of this movement that has begun.
Cool.
Chapter 19, Arts Factory, Mars, Glyn and Clare Farrell. We're not making one of anything, we're making 10,000. Patches, flags for a full-scale rebellion. We're making new things from old. We don't need new. We already have all we need. Share ideas, share skills, share paint, share clothes. Destroy consumer products. Transform them into your own messages. Nothing is for sale.
This factory needs to be a community, and we try our best to be non-hierarchical. We start by setting the goals, showing everyone how to do all the tasks, giving them tools, and most importantly, the autonomy to do their own thing. Diversity of producers is vital.
Everyone brings something to the look of the rebellion. Some are good with colours, some are more playful. The messaging may be precise, but we need variety, so it doesn't look static or formulaic. Our style must be dynamic, pushing forward. We avoid aggressive colours, no obvious left-wing reds or conservative blues, no alienation or division. We are rebelling for a cause that affects us all, so we must be actively inclusive.
We'll hand-paint banners and make sure they're as sharp as possible, thinking about how they might look in photographs, making the message clear, getting the font just right. But the object looks really good. We need to embrace imperfection in a world that's too shiny.
Why an XR Arts Factory? We call ourselves the Autonomous Anarchist Arts Factory. Among ourselves, since it describes what we are doing together. We're industrious for the rebellion.
We present a different way of living. People buy things to make themselves feel good, judging themselves on social media, hunting for life, sharing food, sharing real human feelings, and it's not difficult to offer a better alternative.
We want to look unified, not uniform, but handmade. We work to save money. We aim to use ecologically sound materials, preferably recycled or reclaimed. Sourcing material in volume is a huge job. The work we make contributes to the story of XR, images that spread the message.
We embrace imperfections, mistakes, over-inking, under-inking, the human touch. We have a DIY attitude. It is so joyful to work together on this, one of the most important projects of all time.
Tell everybody everything. Then let coordinators to plan the future as well as empower them.
Let work with goals in progress, bright targets, what's complete and what's still to be done. It is satisfying and ensures we tell everybody everything.
Make the factory a microcosm of the movement. At some point, the rising up core principles had seeped into us. We listened to anti-consumerist music and lyrics, a continual reminder of our aims and ideals. We enjoyed making the future anarchist utopia a reality, if only for a few weeks or hours in the factory.
Change the language we use. When talking about the work we make, it only takes a little effort to remind people how many dozens of people were involved in making one patch, from getting funding, to admin, to outreach, to printing and attending protests, and so on. We remind each other we are all connected and working together with love and grief and rage.
Reflection, research and education. In between periods, we continue at a slower pace to research and develop ideas, both new and old. We teach each other skills want the factory to be and how it should evolve.
Workshops and outreach. We continue doing workshops printing on people's existing clothing so the symbol and message will be seen everywhere. More blocks are being cut with normal clothing and human body in mind. The words and imagery are always expanding.
We make and think about patches, overprinting, and why DIY is needed.
Wearing as such, being resistant.
Embodying resistance.
Reclaiming workwear, high-vis as camouflage.
Saying things without words. Everybody loves the Dino cuts and wood blocks, the heritage of DIY, revolutions.
Taking a pre-apocalyptic approach to style and respecting what exists.
We will never need another charity t-shirt ever again.
DIY as a way of making people earn shit through action. And we'll be blocking over here.
Now ready to print anything you've got. So if you want to bring over your t-shirts, your shirts, anything you're wearing right now, go over there and get it logoed up.
So where's the pink table?
And start spreading the word.
I'm going to pretend to do something and then walk off and look for the
I'd like to say thanks to all of you for coming along today, to Penguins and Vision to work on this book. I'm really excited to get it out. It's all over the country today and tomorrow. And shout out to everyone at Extinction Rebellion for making this amazing movement something really special, and every emergency success will be, and we need to make it work together. So pass
Well, just thank you everybody that's here today, and basically there's like printing going on and all sorts, so just like get a beer and thanks all for coming.
And then